Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Season 12, Episode 9 of Sports Scene. We are here. I'm your host, Nick Kaufman, today, and after a one-week hiatus, we are back, and not just us that's back, but sports are back as well. It's been a great week so far. MLB, NHL, NBA, WNBA, MLS, all have been back this week. We have some great content for you today, and I'm excited to be joined by Daniel Huynh and Reagan Griffin Jr. for today's show. Welcome back, guys.
Nice to be here.
Always great to be back on the show, man.
So obviously we have sports coming back, but the biggest story of the week in the Pac-12 and at USC has been the We Are United boycott from the Pac-12 players who are threatening to boycott the Pac-12 season if they don't get their list of demands met, which includes safety measures for the athletes during COVID, as well as protecting all other sports so they don't get canceled, along with getting 50% revenue from each individual sport. So what are your guys' thoughts on this, and how is this going to affect the Pac-12 season?
Well, I can say this because I've talked to some people And nothing's finite yet. There's still a process to be had within certain teams, specifically USC, about educating players about what's going on, things of that nature. But there is the talks are being had, and certain players do feel like they would boycott the season if these really bare minimum these bare minimum demands aren't met. And this isn't anything bombastic or egregious. They just want to know that they're going to be A, safe, and B, that the conference is going to support them in what they're trying to accomplish. And this has really all been coming out of it. Started at Cal Berkeley. And I have a friend up there who plays football actually. And, when I talk to him, and, he's really emblematic of what this is trying to accomplish, because he's a dude, right? We think about college and student athletes, but he's somebody with a different situation. He has a fiance and he has a child that he goes home to every day. So he has to make sure that they're first and foremost in his mind. Protecting them is his number one priority. And if you can't guarantee that those players are going to be protected on that field, then something has to change. And at this point, it really feels like the Pac-12 and the NCAA in general is trying to use these players as mercenaries to try to get themselves the money that they thought they were going to have, regardless of whether or not they're going to actually be safe on the field. So it's good to see that the players are stepping up, standing 10 toes on what they know that they're worth. And at the very bare minimum, they deserve their safety, and they deserve to be supported when we talk about these things like Black Lives Matter. So what they're demanding is by my estimation, nothing that's really out of the realm of possibility. And I'm happy to see it, man. All hats off to them for what they're doing.
Completely agree with you, Reagan. What the players are asking is not much. They're not asking, a couple $1 billion. What they're really asking for is just common human decency. I mean, there's been a ongoing shift between the power dynamic between the NCAA and the players. I mean, it all started like late last year when the NCAA kind of like ruled that you can now players can now make money from third-party sponsors. I think what the players are doing is great. At the end of the day, because of these players' protests, I mean, this is like, vital that the NCAA and the conference support them, because if these protests, keep moving momentum and the NCAA and the Pac-12 don't cooperate, this could hinder the season, which is in question from the first place. Personally, I think it's as college football has a hard task ahead. Football is the hardest sport to logistically hold a season because of the players involved. So, I mean, this is a crucial moment is coming for the Pac-12 and the NCAA in general, and like how they respond could determine whether there's a college football season or not.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think this is really great coming from the players. I love everything they're asking for. The only one I'm maybe questioning is the players asking for half of the revenue that all the sports generate being given back to the players. I'm not 100% sold on that yet, but I think everything else is common sense. Yes, that needs to be met. These demands need to be met. So I'm completely with it. But turning it back to you guys, what are your thoughts on maybe the division that this could cause? We've seen plenty of players from even USC, Chase Williams, for example, as one of them, who have come out and said that they are in support of this movement, of this boycott from the Pac-12. But then you have other players such as Chris Steele, who have come out and tweeted and said that they want to play football this season. So what are the ramifications of this movement, and could it cause division inside the locker room, or is it something that will mend itself in the end?
I think
I will say this, and excuse me, Daniel, but I think that what you see right now is why there are still discussions being had, and nothing final has been put out yet on behalf of the players in terms of making a finite decision. Because there are still those hesitancies from both sides. Nobody's really come to a final conclusion. But this is just me speaking. I feel like whatever does happen is going to be done uniformly, and it's going to be done in solidarity with one another. So that's why those discussions are still currently being had. And what you might see as a division now is not going to remain the same when ultimately either whether they will boycott the season or whether they won't boycott the season. Whatever decision is ultimately made, it's going to be the players making it completely as one unit. That's my belief, at least.
I mean, I think there is going to be division over this issue because, COVID is, a pretty divisive issue in the first place. But I think it will be resolved before we even have a season. But that being said, this division is crucial because if enough players decide to opt out, I mean, that could be the, final nail in the coffin if we have a season or not. And COVID football of all the sports is the most dangerous to play in a global pandemic because there's 53 men, and most importantly, you have guys in contact, especially on the offensive and defensive line, because those positions could be, have potential to be a COVID disaster. So, I mean, I completely understand why some players would want to opt out, because football, honestly, is a dangerous sport to begin with, and it's especially more dangerous now. But, if enough players opt out, I could see the season being canned.
Yeah, and kind of touching to what you guys said, I think we have seen what Reagan was saying about players will get on board with the same uniform message in due time, and I think we've already seen that happen partially when this was first released, the We Are United movement from the players in the Pac-12. There was actually no USC players on it, and I don't think anyone from Utah. And I think now that a couple of days have passed and all the players have spoken with each other, now there's, I think, at least one player from every single school that's sort of backed this movement. And I think USC now, I know, has a couple of players that have really put their foot forward and said that they're supporting this. So I think over time and in the next couple of weeks, maybe even days, we'll see a more uniform, cohesive message and cohesive group of players from the Pac-12 getting their demands out there and getting what they want. And touching on these conferences and all the players trying to get their demands met, how is this going to affect other conferences such as the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12? Could we see something similar coming from their players, or is this, do you think, just going to be a strictly regional Pac-12 type of thing?
I think this could have a domino effect on all conferences, because at the end of the day, look, the Pac-12 hasn't been a strong conference in quite some time, but it's still a major conference in college football. And USC is in a major market in LA. The NCAA wants those markets to succeed, but back to this: if a major market like USC is like impacted by this crisis, that could that will, I think it'll have effects on what the SEC does and what the Big Ten does, because yes, the Pac-12 is an important market for the NCAA.
I will say that, like we said when we first brought this issue up, that the things that they're asking for are pretty bare minimum stuff. So I do think that there would be some level of a ripple effect of players taking notice and looking at this We Are United list, whether they're in the ACC or the SEC, and they're saying, you know what, these are all things that we should probably have too. This makes sense. So I would guess that there would probably be some level of a ripple effect.
Yeah, I think this is something that we could see hopefully this season in other conferences, that other players get behind this, but I think it's something that'll carry it on down the line. And I think what this marks more than anything is a shift in the power dynamic with the NCAA and the players. I think before it was the NCAA sat on the throne, they were king. What they said was law, was gospel. That's what you had to do. And with the passing of the law recently about allowing players to get money now, it's sort of giving the players more leverage and a bit of a voice, because I think players now are realizing if no one's on the field, the NCAA is a moot point and is essentially useless. So having the players understand their voice and finally using them is, I think, a nice, refreshing thing to see. And I think we could see a lot of change in it in college sports altogether. And tying back to this, with them threatening a boycott, do you think it will actually reach that point, or do you think the Pac-12 will concede or not even concede, but will accept these terms and give the players what they want? Or could we see players holding out and boycotting the season?
Personally, I could see it going both ways, but given the light with the recent NCAA decisions as of late, which have ended up giving the players more power, I think the NCAA and the conferences will eventually give in to the players, knowing that there's just too much money involved. And I think the NCAA more than ever is willing to give more power to the players, because at the end of the day, the NCAA just wants football on the field. So I think there will be some sort of college football this season.
Yeah, I agree. Whether it gets to the point where a boycott actually happens or not, I can't really say, but I do agree that I think the Pac-12 and the NCAA at some point ends up coming around, just because they know what's at stake on their end and they know who they need to get what they want. And that's what we're seeing right now, is, like you said, the power dynamic shift. The players know that they're ultimately the product. In the Pac-12, they've been aware of that for a while now, and it's starting to come rear its ugly head that you have to start paying these dudes a little bit more respect. So I do think that they ultimately fold and that they give the players what they want.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think they will be able to get what they want because, like we've said, all these demands are very self-explanatory, things that really don't even need a second thought about. So I think we will see primarily first the Pac-12, and then if it reaches the NCAA level, the NCAA will also give into this and give the players what they deserve, what they rightfully deserve, given everything that they have done, not just for conferences, but for the NCAA and college sports in general. And now we're moving off the field, off the football field, and we're going to move it over to the sports that are back. It's been a great week, guys. Since hockey started on Sunday, I don't think I've left my couch. I've been watching it all day, every day. And with school just around the corner, I think it's time to start grading some of these leagues on how they've restarted. And quick refresher for everyone, some of the leagues that have come back in the US are the MLS, WNBA, NBA, MLB, and NHL. So, you guys, how are you going to grade everyone?
Well, I want to start to go first. I'm going to go from top to bottom. I think the leagues that have done it the best so far have been the NBA and the NHL. I'm also including production quality into my grade. I'm going to give both leagues A pluses. I think the production quality, especially on the NBA, has been perfect, and the NHL has been surprisingly been well as well. I think I've been thoroughly entertained. That's what sports is at the end of the day. Entertainment. I've been entertained. The quality of play has remained top notch. Yeah, the NBA there's been rust, but that's what you get in the pandemic. But I think it's held on well. And I think the most important is how they handled the COVID, the bubbles. I think both leagues have not had cases, and they have tested for 0 cases so far. NHL, the news came about 2 days ago. So I think the NHL and the NBA have handled their situations well. So A+ on them. MLS, I'm gonna give them a B-. They've had a couple situations where they had to eliminate a team or two. For MLS, the production has been basic, but you expect that. The quality of play for MLS, again, it's been serviceable. At least they have gotten through the tournament. So yeah, B+ is my final grade there. The worst of all, however, it's an F-. I'm going to give it to Major League Baseball. They barely even got it started in the first place. The quality of play has been okay, but the production quality has not been inspiring at all. But the worst of all, what puts me to give them an F is how they handled the COVID cases so far. You've had multiple teams have tested positive for the disease. I mean, Miami is the criminal case here. The Cards just the other day had, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I could be, but around 13 cases. So this disease is spreading like wildfire on these MLB teams, and it's further proof that a bubble is the only way to handle this crisis. So Major League Baseball gets the ultimate failing grade here, F-.
I'll do the opposite of what you did. I'll start from the bottom and I'll go up, and I'll pick up where you left off with the F- for Major League Baseball. I have a question for Rob Manfred, because we all know Rob Manfred. He watches the show every week. I have a question for you, Rob. Do you care about baseball at all? Like even a little bit?
He called
because we've seen things. He called He called the trophy a hunk of metal. And now I'm looking at this COVID return, and it really doesn't seem like he cares about the game. He doesn't care about the championship. He damn sure doesn't care about the players on the field, or else we wouldn't be seeing things as drastically going downhill as we've seen them. I question whether or not the dude actually cares about the game of baseball. And I'm not a person who really cares about baseball. So from me, of all people, that should be an indictment of what you've accomplished thus far. If you do care about baseball, Rob Manfred, you got to start showing it a little bit more, because your fans and your players, they're suffering right now. This game has been suffering for a while, but it's been even worse since you got into the position of commissioner, man. So I give it F-. Like they're if we're putting this in a school setting, baseball is on grounds for expulsion right now. It's looking god awful. I'll give the MLS a B-. And mind you, I'm grading things not just on COVID, but I know a concern that a lot of people had in the return to sports was whether or not it would serve as a distraction from the social moment that we're in right now. What I think is the most important social movement, Black social movement in American history. I think we're living in it right now. So whether or not your sport is dedicating time and energy to that right now, I'm putting that into my grade. The MLS, they've done an all right job, both from a gameplay, player safety, and from a social justice standpoint. They've done all right in all of those respects, but nothing too special. So I'll give you a B- for that. I'll give the WNBA a B, and this is not an indictment all on the gameplay. It's not an indictment at all, really the players in general. This is straight management, man, because some of the conditions that they're living in right now, it's not what they deserve at all. They deserve much better than that. So for them to have to suffer through that just to play the sport that they love and on the contracts that they have, man, it's awful. So I'm really putting that B. It's on the management. If we're looking at it from a group project standpoint, the players have held up their end of the bargain. The ownership and the management, they have not at all. Moving past that to the NHL, and forgive me if I miss out on one of these leagues, but the NHL gets A minus for me. They've been holding up extremely well from a COVID-19 standpoint. I don't believe any of their players are currently afflicted with it. They could be doing a little bit better from a social justice standpoint, but I'm not sure how much I really expect from the NHL in that respect, just because of the dynamic of the league. But I'll give the NBA, they get an A from me, just because they've done a very good job, both from a COVID-19 perspective and from a social justice perspective. I was one of these people that was concerned whether or not basketball would distract from the Black Lives Matter movement. And thus far, they've done a pretty good job on keeping the focus there. As much as basketball does serve as somewhat of a distraction from our daily lives, you go and click on a game, you're not going to not hear about Breonna Taylor. You're not going to not hear about George Floyd. These players are addressing it. The coaches are addressing it. The announcers are addressing it during the broadcast. They're not mincing their words either. They're calling those things what they were. They were murders. They were not incidents with the police. No one's, no one's beating around the bush there. So they're doing a very good job with that in all respects. So I got to give the NBA the highest grade with an A. Did I miss anyone? Did I cover all my bases there?
You got it all,
Cool.
Reagan. You're good. And I'm gonna take it from here now. Same, Reagan. I'm gonna go bottom to top, just like you. Baseball. What are you doing? What are you doing? They could have been the first sport to come back, and now they start up when everyone else. Mind you, baseball, they hadn't even played opening day yet. They were about to start their season. They had all that time to figure out what they were going to do, and they've done nothing. And they start at the same time as the NBA and the NHL, who are in the middle towards the end of their season. So really, baseball's just bottled the entire thing from the get-go. But the way they've handled it right now is atrocious and shambolic, really. And if this were school, I don't even know what's lower than an F minus, but I'd hold the kid back. I'd make MLB drop down a grade in the middle of the year, because they've messed up so badly with this. They've mishandled it so poorly. And you look at the Marlins. I mean, it seems like everyone on that roster has gotten COVID. Cardinals now, a lot of players sick there as well. And when you think about it, baseball, of all these sports that have restarted, is the most socially distant sport that there is. You look, very rarely are you going to have a player within 6 feet of another player. The only time that is when a player's running to base. Other than that, everyone's at least 6 feet apart, probably closer to 20, 30, 40 feet apart. And the fact that they can't manage it in such a distant sport, it just shows the lack of thought and the lack of really care that's come from the league and Rob Manfred himself. Next up, I'm going to say MLS. I'll give them a B minus, kind of touching on Daniel with his production value of the games themselves. They've been playing great for MLS quality soccer, but having gone from watching the Premier League, the Bundesliga, and now the Champions League coming to MLS, it's been a huge drop off in quality of play. So it took a couple games to get readjusted, but I think the MLS has done a great job of making do with what they have. And you look, the reason they're at a B minus range is because of the fact that they had a couple teams get corona before the bubble started, and a couple teams had to leave because of the virus. But for the most part, everyone that has been in the bubble and been a part of it, they've been safe, they've been doing their job. And then teams that have gotten corona during, they've left the bubble. So they've really made it as safe as possible, given some unfortunate circumstances with their players getting corona. So that's a nice bump for MLS, the way they've handled it. And then WNBA, to be honest, I haven't watched a lot of it, so I can't say too much about it, but I do know that NBA, they've been phenomenal, easily one of the best teams at handling this. I'm going to give them an A minus, just because they've had a couple of fiascos and issues with Lou Williams going out and, getting his chicken wings. And I think that just
we're calling it.
Yeah, he wants to go get his chicken wings. And so I think that just wasn't a great look for basketball, and that's my only the only issue that I have with basketball so far. So that's just going to knock them down to an A-. But the cream of the crop, the best of the best, has been the NHL by far. Reagan, I know you touched upon how they haven't been doing a lot for the social movements going on right now. They have been doing some stuff though. For example, there's a very powerful image the other day. Matt Dumba, he's a player in the NHL. He went and gave a long speech that he memorized and spoke to on TV. It was broadcast everywhere. And as he was kneeling during the Canadian and American national anthems, Darnell Nurse and Malcolm Subban both had a hand on his shoulder. And so the NHL has been showing it in their own way, which there hasn't really been kneeling, but they've had like opposing teams and rivals standing next to each other. So it's a different form of showing it, which is up for debate, I guess. But they've been trying to do a little bit on that front. But in terms of the on ice value and everything that's been going on, they've had four or five testing windows over the last month or so. No players have tested positive. All the players are staying in the bubble, doing their part, and they've been trying to make it home for the players. You look at the NHL, when they came into the bubble, they had pictures set up of the players' family and friends and just made it feel like home for these athletes, because they are going to be away from their families. They're going to be away from their friends for so long, playing in the NHL, playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it's a nice little token of thank you for what you're doing, not just for hockey, but for everyone in general who needs that outlet to watch. So I'm giving the NHL A++ extra credit. They've absolutely crushed it in terms of handling the bubble and the playoffs. And we're going to move now. Yeah. So moving from school, we are going to be going back to football, but the NFL now. Training camp is just around the corner, starting, I think, this week. It might have even started already. What does the NFL have to do during Corona? Right now, they're saying the season's on. It's going to happen. Opt-out deadline is tomorrow. We've had a couple big-name players already opting out, some other big players thinking about opting out. So what's the state of the NFL right now? What is going to happen with football in the fall?
Don't be surprised if there's more opt-outs coming, because the NFL has the hardest job of all the professional sports leagues in this pandemic, simply because the nature of the sport itself makes it difficult. Remember, in comparison to other sports leagues, the NFL has a 53-man roster, okay? So it's going to be hard for this league to control the actions of 53 men. And plus, you add in the coaches, the medical staff, and, and other team staff that will be coming along. So, I mean, the NFL, Major League Baseball is proving that there needs to be a bubble in this situation. But even in the bubble, the NFL is going to be having, a tougher job. As again, it's hard to control the actions of 53 men. You think the actions of Lou Williams is going to be a problem trying to get chicken wings? I mean, you're gonna have 7 dudes attempting to get chicken wings with the NFL with their roster sizes. So, I mean, my only solution is the bubble is the only way to do this. I would split the bubbles into 2. I would have an NFC bubble and an AFC bubble. I mean, it's still going to be difficult, but it's not going to be. It won't be the ginormous task of controlling all 32 teams in the bubble. So I think the only hope is the NFL here is have 2 bubbles, not just 1.
Here's my question, because we know, right, the way that the Orlando bubble has operated is that they have multiple courts on which they can play games, and that kind of alleviates the idea. Like, when we talk about the NFL, that's a 3-hour game at the very least, right? So you're going to have to find a space where you have multiple 100-yard football fields. I'm not sure if a place like that, it may be also Orlando. I think that the Disney World of Sports has something like that down there. But to me, it just doesn't seem feasible to make a bubble or 2 bubbles anywhere in America. A, because you don't have the spot for it, and then B, because let me just throw this out the window. You can't have teams traveling right now. I'm completely out on the idea that teams travel anywhere. The MLB's already proven to us that that's just not a feasible option. So we have to arrive on a bubble, right? Now, when we talk about a bubble in America, like I just brought up, there's really not space for it that I'm aware of, at least. I'm not sure where you could pull that off. So the only feasible way, and this isn't me offering this as a suggestion, more just an indictment of how unrealistic it would be to have a safe NFL season. The only way I could see it happening is if they did like the UFC and went to a deserted island somewhere and had space to play football games. Because other than that, there's no way that you can look those dudes in the face and say, Odell Beckham, Cam Newton, whatever. There's no way that I can look you in the face and tell you that you're going to be safe and that there aren't going to be people who contract this disease just by nature of participating in the league, right? We can say that there's going to be dudes who lapse and go get chicken wings, you know what I mean? Like, and that's Lou Williams was obviously going to a funeral, but we can say that there's going to be lapses, but I'm not convinced that the NFL can have a season where just by nature of being on the field, you're going to be at risk for COVID-19. It's just an impossibility to me at this standpoint. So I completely understand the players that want to sit this thing out. I remember Odell, he got a lot of backlash earlier this week because he said that it's not safe for the players. It's not as cut and dry as a lot of sports commentators want to make it seem, as you just play and you get your money, or you don't play and not get your money. It's not that simple, man, because you got dudes who aren't on Odell Beckham-esque contracts who are, they're trying to put make a dollar out of 15 cents with, obviously $200,000 is a lot to most people. But, if you say you're going to have a $200,000 lifestyle, that means you're almost forced to go into the bubble now. So I just don't see it possible as things currently stand. Not at all.
Yeah, and I think obviously players opting out, that's their decision, and there's no way you could get mad about it either way, because some players, they want to get their money, and other players, they have things to worry about, like their family. Look, Marquise Lee, he just opted out, and he said most of it was because of his family. As a young daughter who has asthma, so he's really looking out for his family, and that's something that has to be taken into the equation when looking at this. And as for how the NFL could get its season going, I disagree. I think it is doable, maybe even with travel. One team I'm looking at right now is the New Orleans Saints. What they've done is they rented out an entire hotel, or a bunch of floors in a hotel, and said to all their staff, their players, anyone and everyone who's going to step into the New Orleans Saints facilities, they've said, we have a room for you. If you want it, you can quarantine, isolate yourself here. If you don't want to bring Corona home, or if you want to try and not get Corona, do whatever it is you want, here's a room. It's all yours. And I think that's the best way to go about it. And in the coming weeks, we're going to see how effective this will be, because you look, if the players are just isolating with each other, that's fine, because they're already interacting and going about their business with each other. And so I think if a season were to happen and they wanted to travel, it would have to be just like this, where the team, where the traveling team, just wait, Daniel, just wait, where the traveling team goes to, say, LA to play against a team in LA, they have to rent out an entire hotel, and only team personnel and members are allowed in, and they only go from the hotel to the facilities and back to the hotel. It sounds boring, it sucks, I know, but it's the best way to go about it. And you look, it has been done during Corona, and I know it's a little bit different because this was taking place in Europe where the cases are a lot lower. But in the German soccer league, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, these teams were able to go on the road and traveling. And the way they did this was they isolated at home, they isolated in a hotel, and then when they went away on the road, they were all isolated in one hotel, and they only could go to the facilities and to the hotel. And if anyone left for whatever reason, they were immediately they immediately had to quarantine again for 2 weeks. And as much as that might suck because of how heavy of a hand that the NFL would have to levy on its players to do this same thing, it's the safest option for the players. And I think that's something that gets not forgotten, but something that might be sort of missed in all this discussion, is the safety of the players needs to happen. And if by punishing players is the best way to keep the other ones safe, then they have to do it. And the responsibility in this would be on the players to uphold their end of the bargain if they want to be able to travel to games, and they just have to stay in the hotel and do their job.
But Nick, look at Major League Baseball. Travel is inherently unsafe in this environment. You're gonna bump into something somehow. Look, players are one or two players are gonna get sick, and you can't use Europe as an example. Those countries are much smaller than the United States, and the cases are much lower. I mean, I don't agree with your point there, Nick. How can you travel? And plus, you can't control the actions of 53 men. You just can't.
Here's my question for you, because here's the intangibles that we have to think about. When we say let's rent out a hotel, who's cleaning the hotel?
Yes.
Are they getting tested every day? When we talk about traveling, who's handling their luggage? Are they getting tested every day? We have to think about all of these certain intangibles, because remember, COVID can live on services as well. They can live on certain services for up to hours, right? So we have to think about all of these intangibles when it comes to having the players in whatever bubble we be talking about. We have to have darn near every single person that's coming into contact with these players has to be getting at least daily tested in my mind for me to even start to feel confident about the thing. And that just doesn't seem feasible at this point in time. We're looking at a country right now that's lacking in testing for its citizens that are dying. We have 150,000 plus people that are dead from this thing, a million more that have, been afflicted with it. We're already lacking in testing as a society. How are we going to be able to justify getting it for NFL players, man? It just does not seem feasible at this point.
And Nick, I don't think you may know this, but like, traveling with an NFL team is literally a huge operation itself. If you've seen videos, man, like there's baggage, like you got to cook meals for these teams, and you got to
Or the chefs getting
like,
tested, right? Like all
yeah,
of these things.
And there's like planes involved, like jets. I mean, like it's not like a European squad where you get on the bus and you have 20 guys. Oh, you're right to the next location. No, you gotta and again, the United States is a much bigger country. So, and there's like also like air travel, like all this, Nick. I don't think you're forgetting all the important logistics in play here.
No, I am looking at those, and I think it is feasible. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm saying it's a possibility. It's something that could be done. It's an option to get travel because, like Reagan was saying, it's going to be damn near impossible to have all the NFL teams or even split the NFL teams in half and have them play a bunch of games in one bubble location because there's just a lack of facilities. Games are 3 hours long. It really is a lot to not only be able to get the games going, but also to upkeep the field. You look at the NHL, they are working around the clock to clean the ice, make sure it's a fresh surface for every single game that's going on. So they basically what the NHL has said in the bubble is the ice crew has 1 hour to turn the ice around for the next game. So they need to get a whole new 200-foot slab of ice in there placed and make it game ready. And if they were to do it in a bubble city, they would either need 15 football fields and practice fields and all that in order for the teams to be able to practice. And then they would also be able to have to keep the fields well maintained and be able to flip it over within a matter of a couple of hours, like somehow magically regrow the grass, fill all the, grooves and dugout holes from cleats running around. So I think it's really a bubble in terms of on-field safety aspect is also it's not very feasible because of all the maintenance and upkeep that is required for having football to be played safely.
Yeah, man. That's why when I look at the option that Daniel kind of proposed with the two bubbles, that doesn't seem feasible to me, and then your option with the travel still just doesn't seem feasible to me, man. Like none of this seems like we can realistically say that these players are going to be safe at this point. There's no way to me.
Of all the leagues that can do and make a bubble that large, it's the NFL because they make the most money. The NFL is a mega $1 million corporation, like
billion dollar corporation,
$1 billion on par with except on par with FIFA. So if any league can buy a massive bubble, I think it's the NFL. I think they're capable of doing it.
But like where though? Like that's my thing. Do we know?
That's the question. But all I'm saying is the NFL with the money they make exponentially more than other sports leagues in North America and the world in general. I think the NFL of all leagues can make a bubble.
Well, Daniel, I know you are on a roll right now of this next segment. I know you've been cooking up a take for a while now. So, Daniel, the Zoom chat is yours. What's your hot take this week?
I think we're going to see a lot of changes in society in general because of COVID, but I think one thing it's going to affect is the format of the NBA regular season. I think because of the COVID, I think the NBA is eventually going to shorten their regular season. I think the fans have been, clamoring for this type of change for a while now, and I think that the players are giving signs that it's time because load management has been taking place in recent years, and I think it's sending a message to the owners. We're going to have a shortened regular season after this one, and fans actually like the 2013 regular season. And I think fans have been clamoring it. I think it's going to happen. Fans have been complaining for years that the regular season has kind of been meaningless up until the middle point. I think by shortening it, I think you increase the importance of each and every individual game.
Daniel, I just put this hat on right now, not just because I'm random, but because it's Cap. Everything you just said, I got to put my Cap hat on, man, because here's the thing. I'm a basketball fan. You're a basketball fan. This hat kind of looks ridiculous on my head right now, so I'm going to take it off. But as basketball fans, man, what's the one thing that we want to do? watch basketball. If we shorten the regular season, that's just less basketball for people to play. As basketball players, I know we see like Kawhi and some of the upper teams. I mean, really just the Clippers are the team that primarily took part in load managing this season, just because that's the Clippers. And I know Kawhi is dealing with I believe tendonitis issues in his knee, but across the face of the league, it's not like that's something that a lot of the players feel like they need, or else we'd be seeing a lot more outside of just what happens with the Clippers. So I don't think that load management from Kawhi Leonard thinks that constitutes us shortening the entire season. I want to watch basketball. Players want to play basketball. Obviously, the ownership and management want to make their money from having basketball take place. Shortening the season, that stops all of that. I think we're in this this moment in the NBA where we like to kind of emphasize everything that happens in the postseason, and the postseason is all that matters. The championships, or if you didn't win the championship, it didn't matter. I'm not with that. I used to be with that, and that's something that I used to think. But honestly, I'm of the belief that the beauty of sports is, not just winning, but the process of getting to winning. And part of that process is the 82-game season, and that's how we crown our MVP and our most improved player and our rookie of the year. And I miss basketball throughout this entire period. I don't want to see less basketball. I want to see more basketball. So 82 games, I think what happens is it just shifts. You start the season in December, and you play it out as it would have played out starting in October or whenever it is that they usually started. So I don't think they shorten the regular season at all, man. You just change it up a little bit. That's all.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Reagan on this one, Daniel. I don't think they're going to shorten the season at all. I think what they are going to do, though, is move the season to later. There's already been people wanting the basketball season to start later. I know one of the biggest proponents of this view is Mark Cuban. He's gone out and said, I want basketball to start later in the year. I want basketball in December, because let's be real, basketball isn't exciting until the Christmas Day games, because you look at it, when basketball starts in end of October through pretty much Christmas time, NFL and college football is going on, and not only that, it's the playoff race, it's the college football playoff race. It's exciting. There's a reason to be watching college football and NFL games, and NFL is king in America still. Like, it trumps every other sport by a landslide in terms of viewership and fans, and so basketball just keeps putting itself in a detrimental position by living in football's shadow the entire fall, essentially, when they could easily be at the forefront and be the Giants in terms of viewership and have more engagement by pushing the season back later until mid to late December, because by then football's starting to wrap up. Most of the bowl games have been played. The playoff picture's kind of set. Playoffs are starting in a couple of weeks, and suddenly it's no longer, oh, we've already played 15, 20 games and it's December. It's, oh, we're game one in December. Now we can go later into the summer and be in the spotlight more so than basketball can be in the spotlight more so than it already is. And so that's something that has a lot of support already, even in the basketball community itself. So I think this almost provides the perfect opportunity to make that adjustment in the schedule, because the season's not going to be done until September, maybe even October at this point. So then there'll be a couple, players get a couple months off and then back at it again in December. So I think it's not going to shorten the season, but it's going to push it back, which in the end will be very beneficial to basketball.
I mean, I think you guys are also forgetting some of the advantages of shortening the regular season. Injuries are a common problem in the regular season, and there's also the problem with load management. If you shorten the season to like 60 games, it is more likely, and it's better for the fans if you see Kawhi Leonard and LeBron James playing all 60 games.
I promise you, whether or not the season was 82 games or 42 games, Kawhi Leonard's going to load manage regardless. If you have the luxury of saying my team is so freaking good that I can sit down for 10 games and we'll still be the number 2 seed in the Western Conference, you're going to sit down. There's no players are going to load manage, whether it's, whatever the amount of games are. If they have that luxury of doing that, they're going to do that. Kawhi Leonard's not load managing because there's 82 games to be played. He's load managing because his knees feel bad. And that's, again, that's his right to do that. And if his team's good enough to where he can do that, by all means, go ahead and load manage. But the shortening the season is not going to prevent any load management, man. I don't think at all.
Daniel, I don't think it's going to prevent that either. Along with that, it's sports. Injuries are a part of sports. Even if it's 42 games in a season or 60 games in a season, however many you want, players are going to get injured. Stuff happens all the time. It's the nature of sports. And so all you're doing is, by shortening the season, is taking away half the season. So first of all, if a team, it's kind of what's been going on in baseball right now. The whole thing about it only being 60 games is now If a team doesn't start well, then they're pretty much out of it. If they lose, if they lose 8 of their first 10 games, they're out of the playoff picture at that point. By having a longer season, you can really get into a groove and have like drama develop as the season progresses and have a bunch of different storylines going everywhere. So the longer season caters, yes, to the fans. They get more games. You want to see LeBron. You want to see Kawhi, if Kawhi is not sitting that day, obviously. You want to see Giannis. You want to see all these big name players play as much as possible. And cutting it down is only going to hinder basketball even more. And basketball is trending upwards. And if they want to keep that upward trend, they need to keep playing. They need to be getting people watching them. And that's why I think even pushing the season back to later is ultimately going to help them.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to ask you guys this. In recent years, fans and the league have been complaining. Well, I don't know about the league, but I think the league is certainly aware. Fans who pay good money to go to these NBA games to see their favorite superstars. I mean, load management from a financial perspective is a little bit of a problem. So I ask you guys this: in your opinion, how do you fix the issue from your perspective
of load management?
Of load management, how do you fix it? Because the league's losing money when these stars sit out for a game.
You don't, because it's a decision that the players and the teams are ultimately making. The only thing that you can really try to monitor if you're the NBA is say, okay, if you're going to be taking load management games, let us know in advance. But you can't stop players from load managing. If a team, like I said, if you're the Clippers and you have the luxury of saying, okay, we can sit Kawhi and we still have Paul George and Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams and Landry Shamet and all of these talented players who can help us win ball games, they're going to do that. It's a strategic advantage. It's all it is another basketball strategy. It's one that doesn't take on the court. It takes place off the court. But at the end of the day, it's still a strategy. So you can't stop teams from doing it, and I don't think you should stop teams from doing it. If anything, if you're thinking about it from a financial and fan standpoint, I just say if you're going to do it, let us know in advance so people know, maybe I don't want to buy these away tickets when the Clippers are coming into Chicago and Kawhi is going to be sitting out. Let us know like a week in advance if you're going to load manage a game. That's the only thing I can really think of.
Yeah, for me, I'm not a fan of load management. I think it's ridiculous. I think you're a professional athlete, go and play. That's your job. But what I will say is I get why teams and players do it. And if you have the ability to do it, do it. And that's where in basketball, especially, it's become such a major part of the game that there's no way it's going to be able to be taken out now. And even a shorter season, Reagan was saying it earlier. I mean, they're still going to sit out. Kawhi's still going to sit out. And unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for Daniel and your discussion.
Dude,
I know.
I love talking about load management.
I mean, look, I'm not a big basketball fan, so this was all your realm, but it was a great time talking about it. Like I said, I don't love load management. I think if you're healthy, you play, you want your best players, you want your stars out there. But that wraps it up for today's show. We are doing our final summer episode next time. It'll wrap up our summer series before you can follow us.